Welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. A big thank you to everybody that watched last week's end. That wasn't an episode of the show last weekend. I was decorating. In actual fact, I've been decorating this weekend as well, but because I've been glossing, I managed to get finished a little bit quicker. So I've done an episode of the show. Wow, everybody wins. And of course, as you well know, with December round the corner and the fact that I end up having to work Saturdays and feel like I'm living at work, it all gets a bit sort of, try and squeeze an episode of the show in every here and there. But anyway, so it's good. I'm here. I'm doing an episode of the show, which is cool. So yeah, big thank you to everybody that watched the last episode, liked, commented. There's probably some comments I haven't caught up with, but I will endeavour to do so. So I'm kind of carrying on the theme. As you know, last couple of weeks or last couple of episodes, I've been looking at new independent bottling companies. And I'm sort of continuing that insofar that I'm looking at an independent bottling company's releases, but Blackadder are nowhere near a new company. In actual fact, they were founded 30 years ago by Robin Tuchek, and I mean, can you believe it? It's 30 years. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, I've been in the whisky industry now for well over sort of 25 years, and the thing is, back when Robin sort of like, I mean, I think of Robin as kind of like, as a bit of a trailblazer. He certainly was at the forefront of what I think of as the first wave of independent bottling companies, because back in 30 years ago, there was Gordon MacPhail, there was Douglas Lang probably, and there wasn't exactly a great deal of sort of, well, it was all 40%, occasional cask strength whiskey, but Robin was at the head of this sort of like new wave of independent bottling companies, Blackadder, Duncan Taylor, A.D. Rattray, Murray McDavid and so on, and they came with this fresh approach to sort of being an independent bottling company, and certainly Robin was champion I can't even speak, was basically the forefront of the non-chill filtration, non-colouring, natural cask strength, raw cask, as he had a tendency to call the range, which I still are. And it's interesting because Robin didn't coin or introduce the raw cask range until 2000, which was when I started working for Gauntley's, and that was about the time, I guess, around about sort of then 2001, 2002, that I passed across and I started stocking Blackadder, and have done off and on, when they kindly send me samples, that is. They don't tend to do very often, but et voila, they have indeed. So big thank you to Hannah Tuchek for the samples for today's episode of the show. And like I said, Robin to me was a real trailblazer. He was doing things with whiskey that nobody else was doing, and everybody's kind of caught up now to the whole sort of non-chill filtering and natural cask strength, and it's almost sort of de rigueur. But you have to remember that the whiskey landscape 30 years ago was very, very different to what it is now. So yeah, hats off to Robin. Don't know how much he does in the company anymore, but I'm assuming he's still behind sort of selecting casks and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Hannah kindly sent me a load of samples, of which I've picked out half a dozen that I think are really, really intriguing. Another interesting point just to make about the raw cask range is that you might call it slightly gimmicky, but in the bottle, floating around in the bottom, you see little bits of cask. Now obviously they don't appear as if by magic. I mean, all whiskey has a rough filtration to remove bits of cask, because you don't want, people don't like to see floaty bits, which is why wines and so on and whiskies are all filtered, because nobody likes to see them. But anyway, so Robin probably just sort of sprinkles them in, but there is a good reason for that, because if you get a bottle, and I suggest you do purchase a bottle, and hold it up and just give it a gentle shake, you will see the little bits start to sort of like obviously sort of move around, and you can see the natural oils. You can literally see the viscosity of the whiskey, and that is the whole point, that sort of, when you start to filter and do things like that, you're stripping out elements that give your whiskey character and flavour, and of course we don't want characterless and flavourless whiskey, do we? Anyway, not a great deal else to say about Blackadder, apart from obviously I love all their packaging and all that kind of thing. Very, very cool. Let's just take a look at today's one. Okay, so going to kick off with the Raw Cask Chimera blended malt, bottled at 61% now. I laugh because a number of you that watch the show obviously come to the whiskey tasting evenings, and as you know, earlier this week I kicked off the whiskey tasting evening with that bottling. It was not quite the strongest whiskey there on the night. There was one at 61.2, but nothing below 50% ABV. Anyway, so yeah, 61%. This has got a cask reference of CH 2025 01 and was bottled in February of this year. Bottling number 2 is the Raw Cask Legendary medium toasted fine grain French oak. Try saying that after you've had a few chimeras. So this is bottled at just 59.2%. I think I'll be having a lay down after today's episode of the show. And obviously, as the name suggests, a blend that was aged in a medium toasted fine grain French oak barrel. So cask reference LEG 2023-05. Right, bottling number 3 that we're going to be looking at is the Raw Cask Statement number 12. This is an Inchgower, 20-year-old Inchgower, distilled in 1995, July of 1995, and bottled in September of 2015. Cask number 692, 57.6%. Comes in a lovely sort of box with a little scrolly thing and all that kind of stuff, you know. Yeah, I know, it's all packaging, but it does look the business for a whiskey that retails at nearly 200 quid, and I think it needs to. Obviously look the business I meant, and it needs to taste bloody good, which I hopefully it will do when we get there. The next bottle I'm going to be looking at is a Raw Cask Glentauchers. This is a 12-year-old refill sherry butt number 900473. You thought that one was pungent, powerful alcohol-wise. 65.6%. I mean, good God, how tight was that cask? Is all I can say. So yes, distilled in January of 2012 and bottled in March of 2025. Now we get on to the final two, which are probably the most synonymous of whiskies that you can think of when regards to thinking of Blackadder. The first is the Raw Cask Smoking Islay blended malt, 11 years old, bottled at 59.5%. I remember they used to do a cask strength and a 46%. They probably still do, but always fun to do the cask strength variant. So this is batch number SI 2024-01 and was bottled in January of 2024. And the final bottling of today is the other well-known bottling that they do called Peat Reek. So this is Raw Cask Peat Reek. They used to do a non-raw cask Peat Reek, I think, once upon a time, and certainly have done Peat Reek at 46% and cask strength. So this is Raw Cask Peat Reek blended Islay. Distilled in 2012, bottled in 2022. It's 58.6%, and it's an Oloroso butt, PR 2022-04. So yeah, looking forward to finishing off with a bit of Peat Reek because it's always good fun. Anyway, don't know if he ever, if he sort of like trademarked the term Peat Reek, but probably should have done. But anyway, right. Let's kick off with a bit of Chimera, shall we? Right, okay, so let's see what the Chimera gives us then. Rich, intense, buttery, ripe barley, apricot, straw, stony white fruits, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of wood smoke. There's a little bit of almost kind of earthy manure notes sort of in the background, a very natural. Again, it just feels and smells really, really natural. There's a little bit of barbecue smoke, so there might be an Islay in the blend, or possible a peated malt, I should say, in the blend that they put together, but it's not hugely peated. It's a background whiff of slight barbecue smoke. You know what? think this is absolutely gorgeous. I really like this. I think this is an excellent blend, and again, another thing you should never be sort of concerned about is blends, blended vatted malts, if you like. If it's a quality product and it's a quality company that's behind it, then, you know, not a problem. Let's see what pass on. That's got a lovely mouthfeel, and that's the first thing you notice with this whisky. Very rounded, very full, very fleshy, apricots, white fruit, honey, a little bit of smoke, a little bit of stringent green fruit on the mid palate. A bit masked, obviously, but I'll tell you what, that does not taste like it's 61%. I mean, that's a dangerous whisky, it has to be said. A little bit of smoked meat, some menthol. Chewy, that's a chewy mouthful of a malt. It really is, really impressive, really intense. Love the mouthful feel of that particular whisky. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does. A lot more fruit now, estery fruit, less peat. I've got a kind of an almost kind of oriental note just popped up there, a sort of an oriental fruit, maybe a not quite, maybe mandarin, possibly, not lychee, but I had that, I just got that whiff of oriental fruit. A little bit more smoke, wood smoke, but not peat smoke. The peat has disappeared. A little bit more wood smoke, a little bit more wood character, a little bit more creaminess. See what the parts are now. Softer, juicier, still quite rounded, a little bit more fleshiness on the fruit now. Taming the alcohol has kind of awoken the honeyed element there. Again, a little bit more oak, nice and creamy. Good length, lovely length in actual fact. A little bit of hyacinth or possibly honeysuckle maybe on the finish. Just absolutely gorgeous. I think this hits the shelf at about 60 odd quid. Really fantastic value for money in my opinion. That is a gorgeous whisky to start with. Okay, so let's move on to the legendary medium toasted fine grain French oak. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Fine grain toasted French oak. Well, does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? I mean, it's got that all that tight and that taut French oak, gritty, grainy tannins, dried fruit, a little bit of peach, a little bit of straw. There's a bit of a sour fruit note there in the background. A little bit of citrus, a little bit of kind of almost kind of tamarind, that sort of tamarind citrus, you know, that sort of slightly kind of sour citric kind of note. It's a bit, there's definitely some green fruit, there's definitely a bit of kind of spey kind of character kind of coming through, but it really is pretty oak dominated, and it's all about that sort of grippy, gritty French oak. You can argue that the balance is just about there because you can obviously get some character from the spirit, but it's certainly sort of moved over to the dark side to a certain extent. Let's see what pass on. Excuse me, the French have just got me. Yeah, lots and lots of French oak, lots and lots of tight tannin, spice. It really is pretty drying. There's not a lot of anything else going on in actual fact. The alcohol and the tannins are kind of pretty much masking any other flavour development on the palate. Maybe there's a little bit of green fruit, a little bit of honey. Let's see if a little drop of water kind of opens things up and probably, you know, doesn't make me, yeah. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? It's gone a bit kind of simple. Again, the oak has been tamed. Putting the water in has tamed the oak to a certain extent. It's oily, quite oily. It's a sort of linseed oil note kind of coming out now. A little bit of vanilla, some white chocolate. I mean, it's okay. It's a pleasant enough blend. It's not sort of really exciting me, it has to be said. It's an interesting experiment, and if you're into French oak, if you're into the sort of, you know, oaked whiskies, and there are a lot of you guys that love your oak. I mean, there's a lot of you guys that, for some obscure reason, seem to love your sherry oak. I mean, you know. Anyway, we're not going to go there. Let's see what that's like. It's still quite oaky, although the oak is now more in that sort of hazelnut and white chocolate, a little bit of praline possibly. It's a sensation of spirit there, but not really a great deal of character I can pick out, to be honest with you. It's very sort of, yeah, it's very simple. It's very simple. It's a little bit heavy on the oak. It's not really sort of floating my boat, but it's an interesting whiskey and the quality is good. So okay, so let's move on to the 20-year-old Inchgower. See what nose gives us on this then, shall we? That's quite an elegant nose. Lots of mature oak. It's got not a great deal of sawdusty, but it's got that mature oak character. There's some sour fruit, sour apple, menthol, grapefruit, toffee. It's got a very natural, traditional, but I don't mean traditional in the sort of hardened kind of, you know, Glenfarclas-y kind of traditional or something of that kind of ilk. It's just, it feels like an old-fashioned whiskey. It's slightly coffeed. There's a little bit of tannin. There's some old honey, ripe apricots. It's got that real, almost purity of stone fruit. It's like picking up an apricot and smelling the stone. That has got a lovely maturity. There's an element of sort of that kind of Sauvignon Blanc herbalness that you often get with old, well, with Spays full stop. But it's just got that lovely maturity to it. Absolutely fabulous. Super pass that. That is just sublime. It's got that lovely aged, oxidised kind of character, almost like a fine cognac. Yeah, old sort of oxidised apricot rather than apple, but you're in that kind of old cognac-y kind of sort of style, I suppose, for want of a better word. There's some malt, there's some barley, there's some not a great deal of sawdust in actual fact for such well, for a relatively old whiskey. That the oak isn't that sawdusty. I would guess possibly a refill cask at its beginning. Because the spirit is just absolutely sort of shining, it has to be said. It's 57%, but it's not too masked, and it's not that, you know, alcoholic in the end of the day. So again, another sort of slightly dangerous whiskey, I suppose. A little bit of citrus on the finish, a little bit of menthol, a little bit of green fruit. Yeah, really like that. That, like I said, natural is just the absolute key word with that particular bottling. Let's put a little drop of water in it. Don't think it really needs it, but we'll see what a little drop of water does to it. Get a little bit more lemony now. Still feels really mature. It's a lovely nose. Again, not as oaked, and not sawdusty and that kind of thing. It's more old, mature, oxidised spirit character. I mean, and that's lovely. Again, sort of like a little bit of sour green fruit. Let's see what that's like. Again, very much like the nose, very much spirit orientated, mature spirit, not too much oak. So it's not particularly cluttered with sort of old sawdusty oak, which I do love. I love an old sawdusty oak, but I love the sort of the natural maturity of this spirit. This is just sat in the cask, you know, and done its thing. And an ex-bourbon cask, one would imagine. I'm certainly not getting any sherry notes, and it's just gorgeous. Just a gorgeous whiskey at the end of the day. Okay, so moving on, this is the 12-year-old Glentauchers refill sherry butt. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Cool, that's tight. It's almost grain-like. I'm getting that kind of grain-like dried fruit sultana, dried orange, tangerine. There's a bit of menthol, some clove, licorice, raisins. I'm actually not getting a lot of Glentauchers, which I'm amazed at, because Glentauchers has that intense minerally character which stands up to oak really, really well. And it's kind of, well, if it was a dog, it'd be on its back wanting its belly rubbed, I think. It's really been hammered by this sherry cask. Okay, I get a sensation of minerality. It has a tightness there, but this is all sherry cask. There's a bit of manure, possibly a little bit of sort of earthiness. Again, it's got a nice natural kind of character, but it's just sort of a bit one-dimensional, really. And like I said, that is quite a surprise. So I'll pass on. Sherry cask, treacle, raisins, dark toffee, very alcoholic, really masked. Again, I'm getting no distillery character, I'm getting no Glentauchers, there's no minerality there, and I'm kind of amazed at that. Because, I mean, like I said, Glentauchers is one of those kind of whiskies that really has the character to stand up to hammering by sherry. Or any cask in actual fact, but this is just kind of just all about the sherry cask. There's no Glentauchers character there whatsoever, unfortunately. Let's put a little drop of water and see if that brings out any Glentauchers character. Just kind of smells a bit old now, old wood. And again, it's probably a little bit more sherried, or darker sherried fruit, you know, more raisins and sort of dried fig and that kind of thing. But again, there's no Glentauchers character there at all, which is, again, like I say, quite a surprise. Let's sort of pass on now. Now, usually when you put a little drop of water with the cask strength whiskey, you expect the sort of like 8 times out of 10, that the oak kind of drops off, and you get some distillery character or spirit character. Not in this case. It's pretty much again the same as it was when it was neat. A little bit longer, but it's still very, very sherried, and for me it's just not that interesting. It's a little bit one-dimensional. Very clean sherry, I will give you that. There's no sulphur blemishes, no off notes, and I know there's an awful lot of you will probably be sort of going, oh, I want this, buy this bottle of whiskey. I love the sherried whiskies, yeah, and I know there's a lot of you out there, and I keep trying to sort of talk about the balance, but you know, I mean, last weekend's, or not last weekend's, this week's whiskey tasting evening, I think it was the Highland Lead Malt Lac that was the eventual favourite, and it was kind of like, oh God! I mean, it was a good sherry cask. It was a good sherried malt lac. It was, you know, and I wanted to show it because it was sort of like a good version of a sherried whiskey. There was an element of the malt lac character that came through, but it was kind of, you know, There were some whiskies on there that people didn't get, you know, which was a real shame because there was some great whiskies. But anyway, you know, everybody's different. Everybody has their loves and their hates, and you know, it's up to retailers such as myself to basically stock a varied amount of things. If I was going to stock everything that I liked, you know, there'd be nothing for people that didn't quite like the things that I did. So I would be shooting myself in the foot, wouldn't I? But I would love to steer you in the region of stuff that I like. But anyway, that's just a bit too wonderland. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Raw Cask Smoking Islay. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Mother, that's got Stoischer written all over it. I mean, that's like that astringent kind of green fruit, green pepper. Oh my God, that stinks of Stoischer. Loads of herbal peat. Lovely intensity, you know, marzipan, bog myrtle, seaweed, smoked meat, vanilla. Oh, yeah, that hits the spot. That really does. I mean, that's got intensity written all over it. I mean, now if you don't like your peated malts, then you're not going to enjoy this. If you like your peated malts, you can absolutely kill for this because it is stunning. Absolutely stunning, really intense, really in your face. Yeah, that is absolutely no doubt where the bulk of that spirit comes. It's probably going to turn out that actually there's no Stoischer in it whatsoever, but that really stinks of Stoischer. I mean, there may well be some Kalila possibly, but you know, that smells of that to me anyway. But anyway, let's sort of pass on. Green pepper, barbecue sauce, smoked meat. I'd almost go and say there's possibly a bit of leche in there, but this is an Islay, so yeah, there isn't any leche. That's quite masked. That's quite intense. I mean, it's 59.5%. There's a little bit of sweetness of the almost honeyed kind of character. It's kind of a sort of honey glazed, sort of barbecued, smoked meat kind of character going on there. Yeah, that's gorgeous. That is lovely. I mean, that really sort of like, you know, floats my boat, as they say. And it's got a lovely complexity, even though it does seem to be pretty much Stoischer. But like I said, it's just a lovely whiskey. That. Okay, it's not doing, water is not doing it a great deal of favours, it has to be said. It's bringing out a little bit of a almost kind of faintiness, but it's kind of emphasised the herbal kind of peat. The sort of like the barbecued meaty element is kind of almost kind of slunk off somewhere, but still got a lot of green pepper anyway. Let's see what that's like. Yep, less peat. Still got that slight astringency, that green fruit, that green pepper. A little bit of barbecued sort of meat character going on still, which I'm glad of. It's softer, it's less intense. It's absolutely fine with water if you're kind of that kind of disposition. But personally, I would have that neat. I mean, yeah, take all of that kind of intense green pepper kind of green peat kind of character. Yeah, you know you want to do it that way. Right, okay, so on to the final whiskey of the afternoon, a bitter peat reek. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Oily, linseed oil, herbal sherry, smoke, peat, iodine, earth, medicinal herbs, there's a kind of, again, a very natural kind of character going on here, it has to be said, and it's kind of very stinky, and it's kind of, it's not sulphurous, and so, you know, there is no sulphur blemish there, but it's kind of on the cusp. It's got that kind of earthy, stinky, briny, burnt wood, shellfish, peat, smoke. That is complex, it has to be said. And again, this is the point about blends or blended malts, is that, you know, the whole idea of putting a blend together is to create something that doesn't exist naturally, and to make something that's in essence greater than the sum of its parts. And yeah, there's a real difference between this and the smoking Islay, and this has just got such an intensity. It's let's see what pass on. Green peat and sherry. I mean, a lovely couple, that has to be said. Peat and sherry. Oh, it has an intensity. There's iodine, there's smoked meat again, but it's kind of more iodine-y, peaty, kind of medicinal, and herbal and mentholy. And then you got that sherry sort of dried fruit, the sort of like the slight treacle note, and sort of, you know, raisinated fruits and oloroso, and it's really masked, it's intense. It's not a shrinking violet, but oh, it's chewy. That's a lovely whiskey, it has to be said. And you know, if you're gonna do peat and sherry, you may as well do peat and sherry pretty good. You know, and that is a pretty good peat and sherry, it has to be said. Let's see what a little drop of water does to it. Again, less peat, less sherry, a little bit more kind of almost faint. There's a very youthful note that's kind of come out now. There's a bit of sauce, a bit of barbecue sauce, with smoke. It's sweeter, it's less peated. It's less fun, it has to be said, at the end of the day, when you put a little drop of water with it. Let's see what the pass up. Still savoury, still meaty, still full, a bit simpler, not as much fun. Like I said, you know, if you're going to have this, buy this bottle of whiskey, just don't bother putting any water with it. I mean, you know, just revel in the intensity of it and the sort of like the characteristics of it without any water. I mean, I know there's a lot of you that are, shall we say, a little bit on the effete side, shall we say, and can't take your whiskey neat, but you know, go with it on that one. I mean, because that is without water, that is stunningly good. That is just sort of peat and sherry, but it's got more than just peat and sherry. I'm being a bit disingenuous by saying it's peat and sherry, because there is a little bit more to it than just that, and it has a real interest, and you know, lovely characteristic. And if you love your peated malts, ideal. So that's some today's episode of the show. But firstly, a big thank you to Hannah Tuchek for the samples for today's episode of the show. I hope you've enjoyed it. I mean, I've loved this. I mean, I've done a couple of episodes, I think, on Blackadder throughout the years of doing that. But you know, I've always been a big Blackadder fan. I've loved their whiskey. You know, and my love is not blind, as you know. They've bottled some good stuff. They've bottled some maybe not so good stuff. Well, I mean, and I guess that's from a personal angle. I wouldn't say they've bottled anything that's been poor quality. The Chimera, I love the Chimera, and like I said, you know, I'm a big fan of blended whiskey and all that kind of stuff. And when you have something that's got the complexity of that, and the intensity, I'm behind that, it has to be said. The legendary toasted French oak and all the Yeah, well, I mean, it was very oaky. It was very toasted. It was very French. It was very French. It certainly caught me in the throat. It has to be said. But it was a bit one-dimensional at the end of the day. It was pretty much all about the sort of like the oak, and well, yeah, it is what it is at the end of the day. The raw cask statement, Inchgower. I love that. That was a great whiskey. That was wonderfully mature. It's old-fashioned. There was not too much oak character. It was very uncluttered. It was very kind of focused. It was very much about the sort of like how the spirit had matured and oxidized, and that was what got me. It was all about that kind of, the spirit has been left for 20 years in a cask just to do its thing, and this is what it's kind of ended up at. Stunning, as to be said. The Glentauchers, like I said, it was kind of a little bit disappointing because I was expecting a little bit more Glentauchers character. I know that it has the sort of like the cojones to sort of deal with sherry, but in this case it really didn't. The Smoking Islay, I loved that. I loved that kind of green fruit, green pepper kind of stoicher character, and like I said, it probably turns out there's absolutely no stoicher in that at all, and I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, the final whiskey, the raw cask Peat Reek, it was as good as I remember it. I mean, you know, that there is sort of like whiskies are synonymous with independent bottling companies, and Peat Reek and raw cask Smoking Islay are the ones that are most synonymous with Blackadder at the end of the day. They probably don't want to be synonymous with that, but that's their kind of calling card at the end of the day, and they do it so well. So all I can say is that, you know, if you've never had a Blackadder whiskey before, go and get one. There are certain of these these ones that are being stocked by a certain wine merchant, for obviously, but you know, support them, you know, because they're bottling some great whiskey. Anyway, all that's left to say is, like I said, the next few weeks, you know, up until the new year, may well be a bit patchy. I'll try and slip an episode in when I can, but until then, all that's left to say is good afternoon and good dramming.